Okay, so audience analysis is something that oftentimes we forget about when we think of choosing the topics that we're going to deliver for our speeches, or even how we progress with those topics, what kind of language we use, what types of persuasive arguments we make, and so on. And honestly, that's a big mistake. You don't want to forget who your audience is and how effective you need to be specifically for them. So we're going to look at audiences, who they are, and what they want. We're going to address a few things, ways to gain information, some of the ways that the professionals get the information, and some of the things that you should really focus on when determining not only the direction you want to go with your topic in general, but specific arguments that you want to make and how you make them. We'll probably spend a few weeks on this here and there, so really dive into this and consider it before getting too deep into your topic. So let's first look at a couple of ads. And I want you to think to yourself, how do you connect the audience and the persuasion in your experiences, and how do they do it in the professional world? So for example, I'm going to throw up two ads here. I want you to look at them and think, how are those strategically used to persuade a particular audience? Here is the first one that I have. It is for animal testing. I'm not sure exactly who created it. I would assume it's something like PETA or something along those lines. But if you'll notice, there are a couple of key things. One, it's a female, an almost Barbie-looking female. There's a lot of pink. Typically, advertisers have found that women are persuaded through emotion. It could be frustration, it could be sadness, but a lot of that guilt and fear and sadness are a big part of it. Now, another factor is that the most egregious form of animal testing typically is on cosmetics. And the majority of people that use cosmetics are females. So they are gearing this ad specifically towards females. And in doing so, they're using colors that females tend to navigate towards. Not always, but they tend to. I personally don't navigate to pink, but many do. They are using some of the imagery to create anguish, frustration, sadness, and so on. So they're motivating through a lot of emotion, and they're gearing it specifically to an audience of females. Here's another one, McDonald's. Who are they gearing this towards? But children. And how do you know, apart from the fact that it is for Happy Meals, but look at the coloring of this ad. It's very primary colors. There's yellows and greens and reds and so on. There's a lot of intense in this ad. There are a lot of cartoon type imageries in this ad. You've got some here. The labeling is very cartoonish. You've got the cartoon down here. You have toys and face painting and all of those things. This is definitely geared towards children. Different ads are geared towards different people. This same ad for Happy Meals in, say, a Women's Day magazine may be completely different and be geared towards the money that women might save when they take their children to get a Happy Meal, or the convenience of a Happy Meal, and so on. Okay? So there are different factors for each of these ads based on who they are advertised towards. The way you approach your speech topic should be very similar. Consider who your audience is and what they particularly need for you to say or to do in order to persuade that audience. And that's what we're going to look at now. In general, here is a definition of audience analysis. It is the process of gathering and analyzing information about the audience members' attributes and motivations with the explicit aim of preparing your speech in ways that will be meaningful to them. So you really need to think about who your audience is and what they particularly need. I went to a Valentine's Day dinner a long time ago, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. I don't even remember. It was a long time ago. But it was at the zoo. I know that sounds very weird, but it was at the zoo. Just leave it at that. And maybe I should have expected it not to go so well. But the dinner itself was great. I'm vegetarian, so I didn't have to worry if the meat came from someplace weird. But the dinner, after it was over, they had a speaker. And actually a set of speakers. And the speakers came up and did this whole presentation on animal love. And it was incredibly inappropriate And they also kept talking about how awful romance is and how love isn't really worth anything. And I thought, did they know who their audience was? This is a Valentine's Day dinner. What on earth? So audience analysis, in that case, was totally thrown out the window. But oftentimes we know who our audience is, but we don't really think about it in detail and use it to gear our message in the most appropriate way. So let's look at some of those little aspects about audiences that we can use to understand them better and to be as effective as possible. Now, there are two basic categories to audience analysis. One is demographics and one is situational. Now, the demographics are more of the fixed, non-changing details about an audience that you need to know if it applies to the topic. Let me highlight what I mean here. These are just a few of the demographic areas: age, race or ethnic and cultural background, socioeconomic status, which is how much money do they make and what is their career path and so on, religion, political affiliation, and gender. So those are really common aspects of demographics. These things are fixed. I'm going to be the age I am regardless of what your topic is. I personally am going to be female no matter what topic you choose. They're fixed. They're not changing. They could play a part in how you address the topic. For example, if you were doing a speech on cosmetic testing on animals and you knew that the vast majority of your audience was male, you would want to consider approaches to the topic that might differ if the vast majority was female or half and half. So you really want to think about gender in that case. If I was doing a speech to encourage people to purchase life insurance, I might want to know their age. And I might want to know that so that if I am speaking to an audience of 18-year-olds, I would approach that topic in a way that would be more beneficial to an 18-year-old who doesn't really expect life to end immediately versus a group of retirees. There are an astronomical amount of differences between those two groups, and I do need to know the age in order to effectively persuade in that way. Now, reverse, life insurance. Do I need to know gender for life insurance? No. Do I need to know race? Maybe. It depends. Cultural background? Maybe. Depends on the area they're from. Maybe there's a high level of toxins in that area and life insurance is at a higher rate there. Same with the other, cosmetic testing on animals. Do I need to know age for cosmetic testing on animals? Probably not. Those are the things that you want to keep in mind. If you don't keep those in mind, then you run the risk of stereotyping. And you don't want to do that because that'll alienate your audience. Only choose demographic information that actually matters to your speech. And when you use demographics, always, and I can't emphasize this more, always combine it with the next type of analysis, which is our situational. You should never rely solely on demographics. Okay, so let's look at this situational. What is this information that we need to combine with demographics? Situational analysis is very specific to that situation, which is why it's called situational. Features of the audience that are unique to that speaking situation. And this comes in a lot of forms, and some may matter for your topic and some may not. I'm going to highlight them all, but really emphasize a couple that I think are pretty universally useful depending upon the situation. But most of the time these are useful for every topic. So here are the factors to consider when you're thinking of situational analysis. Size of the audience. Do you have an audience of 22 college students? So the size is fairly medium. It's not a group of 6 or 7, but it's not a group of 100 plus. Or do you have a really large audience? You're a political candidate and you have an audience of thousands. And if you consider media communication, televised communication, or an internet communication, you have an audience of millions upon millions. Size will make a difference in how you approach the topic. Can you use specific delivery skills that are a little bit more intimate in a smaller setting rather than a broad setting? And how can you create a sense of intimacy when you have a group of multiple thousands of people? The other thing to look at, size isn't going to be a real issue for you guys in your class since you know you have a class of 22 students or less, so that's something that you don't have to worry about. But physical setting of the speech may be a factor in your future. Maybe you are giving a presentation in a speaker's hall for a TED Talk, for example. Or maybe you are giving a presentation in, say, a boardroom. Or maybe you are delivering a quick briefing in a meeting conference room. Those may factor. Or maybe you're doing a promo outside. That's going to make a difference. So the physical setting of the speech may alter how you approach the speech, such information that you might give and so on. Those two, while important, aren't really going to play into your speeches because you will be in a class of 22 in a classroom. So you know exactly what to consider when you think of size or physical setting. However, the other two, those will definitely apply to your situation. Audiences' attitudes, values, and beliefs. What are their pre-existing attitudes or values or beliefs about your topic? So what, and it doesn't, honestly, it doesn't even have to be about the topic. It can be in general. And this could go back to some of those demographic details. What is their political affiliation? Or what is their religious affiliation? Where are those values, their beliefs, and how do those play a part in your topic? Do they play a part in your topic? So really, honestly, these are pre-existing issues that may play a part in your topic that aren't really specific to the topic itself. Now the other one, audience's feelings, those can play a part in a lot of things. The first one is probably the one you're going to focus on the most. Their feelings towards the topic. So once you choose the topic, if you know exactly what you want to do, consider some of those questions here. Is the topic new to your audience? Have they ever heard of it before? If the topic is brand spanking new, you're going to have to address it from a very fundamental aspect. You're going to really have to start easy on this. And if it is a complex topic, then you have to be even easier on your audience and make this as simple as possible. But if the topic is new, you're going to have to give background. If it is old hat, meaning they know a lot about it, if you're going to discuss the iPhone, or Apple. People know what Apple is. So you don't have to spend a lot of time giving background information on what Apple is. But if it is a German company that has created this brand new product that nobody knows about, you may have to give some background on it. So is a topic new to your audience? How much do they know about it? That's the next thing to address. What is the information that they do already know? And how much of it do they know? Maybe they know what life insurance is, but they have no idea the details of life insurance. So you don't have to explain what life insurance is or what cosmetic testing is, but you may have to explain what constitutes it, what is involved in the process. So how much do they know about the topic? What do you gotta dig into here? And then finally, under the topic, the feelings about the topic, do they have a positive or negative feeling about the topic? If you're trying to convince us all to switch to Sprint, what if your audience, many of which have Sprint, are disgruntled and they don't want to continue with their contract with Sprint because they hate Sprint or AT&T or T-Mobile or whoever? Are those things that you have to take into consideration? Absolutely. What do they feel? Are they anxious about your topic? Going back to cosmetic testing, does your audience already feel guilty about cosmetic testing and have this anxiety and they don't want to hear it? They don't want to hear anymore because they don't know what to do. You could take that into consideration. For example, when I said in a previous presentation, I said that I became a vegetarian based on some factory farm speeches. Now, if my husband was in the room, because I've had many conversations with him about it, the imagery, the language, the stuff that I saw would totally convince him that factory farms are awful. But his feeling, his love for meat, his desire to stay as is would be so strong that it would be hard for him to switch from being a carnivore or an omnivore to a herbivore or a vegetarian. And therefore, if I was writing that speech, I would take the negative feelings that he or any other person that doesn't want to switch may have about that topic and create arguments or create opportunities for your audience to ease that pain. So for example, I could say, hey, I'm not asking you to become a vegetarian. You don't need to do that. But what you might consider is purchasing organic food or buying your meat from a local farmer's market or something along those lines. That gives them an out, a way to ease that guilt. And that's only something you're going to be able to do if you know how they feel about the topic in the first place. So what are their feelings? Is it positive? Is it negative? So the audience's feelings towards the speaker may be a part too. It may not factor in. Sometimes when a person has a reputation as just a really good speaker, the audience holds them to that reputation. So they expect quality, which is fantastic. You can always reach to achieve it. But if the speaker has a reputation for being funny, for example, that also plays a part. Audiences might expect the speaker to be funny. Do you take advantage of that and use it to your benefit, or do you show them that you can be more than funny? That is something that you may want to know about your audience. And then finally, the occasion. For us, that's not going to factor in very much. We are all part of a group of speeches that are for a public speaking class. But in many cases, occasion does matter. Is it a eulogy? Is it a wedding ceremony? What kind of speech are you giving? What is the occasion? That's going to factor into how you deliver the information. So these are all big parts of your audience analysis. And like I said, should always be used in connection with those demographics. Those demographics should never, ever be by themselves. Now, this is a new form of research that I think is quite interesting, and it is how the professionals, and I say quote professionals, meaning advertisers, how they use audience analysis. So we're going to watch this real quick, and I'm going to ask you to pay close attention to this video because it is part of a discussion we're going to have later this week.
I've always wondered what happens to my brain when I watch a TV ad. An emerging field of research called neuromarketing claims to answer just that question. So I visited NeuroFocus, where they monitor the electrical currents in different parts of my brain as I watched a commercial.
Neuromarketing is the application of neuroscience to marketing. What neuroscience has done is taken us a step further, taking marketing through the lens of neuroscience close to where the action happens, to where the truth really is. That enables us to understand what persuades and engages the human mind. As you can see, there are these three big graphs, right? The first graph on the top is called attention. How much attention were you paying to whatever it is you were watching or experiencing?
Okay.
Now, as you can see, the attention is very high. The ad was so interesting that you really were paying attention. The second graph is equally interesting. It is the emotional engagement with the ad. Did the ad emotionally engage you? Because sometimes you see when I just wave my hands, you may pay attention, but you're not emotionally attached to my waving my hands, right? This is memory retention. What part of what you watched you thought was so interesting you chose to remember it. First part was very memorable for you. Oh, that is interesting and new. People making car noises. Then, what you thought was memorable started to diminish. Suddenly, somewhere it picked up, and then it kind of flattened out. So we would look at this and tell the ad maker, great concept, perhaps you need to shorten it. So we would say this ad is a good ad that has the potential for greatness, but a bit of work needs to be done. Now, on the right-hand side, you see what we call the palette of scenes, significant scenes. Things that your brain thought were interesting, right? What I'm struck by in this ad is the number of significant scenes. For such a long ad, there were not that many. The saving grace would be the last scene, right? Because the word Honda showed up, the brand name showed up, right? Now if I ask you, what Honda model was this ad for? If the ad maker was really smart, the scene where the Civic showed up would have popped up also as a very significant scene.
But it didn't.
It didn't. And all that was interesting was the very end, Honda. So if Honda, the brand, was interested in showcasing their brand, this is a good ad. It did what it was supposed to do. But if Honda was hoping to sell more Civics as a consequence of this ad, I think the ad missed its mark.
So is this showing at all that I'm resisting the ad?
Well,
Tell?
I think that, there is no meaning to resisting an ad. It's more the question is, are you compelled and persuaded by the ad? I would say no. No, you're not. You think it's a cute ad. You paid a lot of attention to it. All right? But then you also thought that some parts of it started to become insufferable. I mean, it's just a little too much. Right? All of those are readily apparent from the data. I don't even have to ask you.
Dr. Pradeep says his data, measured in milliseconds, shows an ad's first impression on your brain is what matters most. A good ad primes your memory so that when it's time to buy, you choose their product.
All right. So as you can see, they are taking quite a bit of effort and putting it into understanding who their audiences are and what they need and what they are interested in and how they feel about all their topics. So even though this is something that I'm asking you to scratch the surface on, if you think about it, it is an area of research that has just gotten more and more nuanced down to the specific science that triggers brain activity for advertisements. So what can you do? How will you analyze your audience? You're obviously not going to hook a machine up to their head, say your speech, and then read out the codes. So what will you do? How can you make your speech memorable, or at least gear it in some way to your audience that is as effective as possible? You will actually be attending a mandatory speech workshop about mid-semester. And with this workshop, you will need to bring with you what I call a survey, a speech survey, an audience survey. This is a 5 to 7 question survey pertaining to your erudite speech. Whatever topic you chose, you're going to use this and hand it out in class in order to gain information about your audience, and it will be part of your grade for the mandatory speech workshop. So here are a couple things to keep in mind. You want to make sure you follow the basic rules here. First, you need to include both demographic and situational analysis. That means at least one demographic question, and only if it applies to your topic. The rest need to be situational questions. And at least one question must be open-ended. And when I say open-ended, that means a question that is not a fixed response. So it should be a question that allows the responder to respond in sentence format. Not, how old are you? They can give you a very fixed answer that's very simple. Not, do you like Sprint? That's yes or no. Those are fixed responses. You want an open-ended response. So you need to have at least 5 questions. You can have up to 7, sometimes more if it really is necessary, but at least 5 for an effective grade. And you need to follow these rules and ask questions that actually matter. If you ask a question like, what is your gender? And it does not apply to your topic, it has no point, no worth to your topic, then you'll lose points. So make sure that you are only choosing questions that actually matter. And then you're going to make copies and pass them out during your mandatory speech workshop. There are particular dates for this, so check the list on the syllabus and see what exactly it is, the date that you need to come in. But the syllabus workshop, or excuse me, the survey questionnaire is a major part of understanding who your audience is. So you'll pass these out to your whole class. There's 22 usually max in a class, so 22 students. You'll pass that out to your classmates. They will fill it out, and then you'll get it back at that same moment. And we will look for themes that you come up with. You can get averages of age if that's necessary. You can get likes and dislikes and so on. And you can use that research in your speech if you would like as a source. Here is a sample survey. This would be one that I might do if I was going to do cell phone providers. and I was doing a speech that was trying to encourage people to switch their provider to a particular one, I might create this survey. Look, if you look here, I've got 2 of the exact same survey on the same page. That way you can cut the page in half, and each half page is a survey. That'll save you some paper. So you would create 5 to 7 questions. If you'll notice here, there are 6 questions, and I've used a variety of different types: a yes, no, total number of amount that they pay in their cell phone plan. I've asked them to circle something. I've asked them to fill in the blank. You don't have to use this much variety, but I'm showing you the different ways. A Likert type scale where they rank from 0 to 10. They choose which, or not rank, they choose which feeling they have. And then an open-ended. Tell me what would convince you to change your cell phone provider. Please explain in detail. That gives a lot of freedom of explanation. So this is just a sample of the survey opportunities you have. You must do that and bring in all of the copies with you during the day that we do these. If you have questions, feel free to let me know what those are, and I'll answer them as best I can. Remember, this is not something to blow off. This is a major factor in public speaking. If you don't do this right, then you can run amok of your speech and be ineffective. All right, guys, good luck on those surveys.